嘅活動啦，我哋嘅主題係 The Failures of Well-being and the Power of Generative Social Fields 幸福感嘅缺失以及創造性社交場域嘅力量。好多謝大家咧喺百忙之中咧都仍然選擇抽空嚟到呢度咧去出席今日嘅活動，同我哋一齊咧去學習同埋交流嘅。咁等我做少少自我介紹先。咁咧我係Catalyst Education Lab 嘅 Angeline， 係CEL 嘅策略同埋項目總監啦。咁我哋 Catalyst Education Lab 咧簡稱 CEL， 係香港咧喺2018年成立嘅非牟利組織，希望咧去促進教育工作者嘅專業發展同埋學校嘅變革管理，去推動教育創新。喺我哋唔同嘅開展嘅計劃當中咧 ，Compassionate Systems 咧係我哋尤其在乎嘅一個。其實喺18年底咧，當我哋帶住香港一班校長同埋老師去到 MIT 出席當地嘅教育論壇嘅時候咧，其實大家當時就參與咗Dr. Mehta Bull 同埋 Peter Senge 兩位嘅一個工作坊啦。當時嘅校長同老師咧已經話，以呢一個結合咗 social emotional learning 社交情緒學習同埋 systems thinking 系統思維嘅教育框架咧，好值得帶嚟香港。咁我哋團隊第一步做嘅咧，就係先自己去做一啲嘅學習。對我自己嚟講咧，我參加咗3日嘅入門培訓課程之後咧，亦都之後參與咗 Master Practitioner 嘅1年嘅培訓課程，亦都之後去再鑽研咧呢一個 How to Hold Space 嘅一個 program。我諗對我自己嚟講咧，都估唔到呢一個修練嘅歷程咧，對我自己嘅人生係帶嚟咁大嘅影響。無論係點樣去自處啦，點樣去待人接物啦，點樣去處事處世咧，都因為呢一個 Compassionate Systems 咧而有好多嘅一啲嘅反思。咁至於我哋點樣去同香港嘅其他去做推廣咧，其實喺19年底咧，我哋已經同Dr. Mehta Bull 咧就去商量，點樣可以喺香港大張旗鼓咁樣去做啲宣傳咧？咁但係可惜咧，當時就因為疫情咧，而我哋破壞咗我哋嘅一啲計劃啦。但係轉移去做小報紙嘅推廣，透過我哋嘅相熟嘅學校同老師，慢慢咁樣走落嚟咧，時至今日，透過我哋嘅活動咧，都有至少700位嘅教育工作者咧，係認識同埋接觸咗 Compassionate Systems 嘅。咁至於嚟到今年咧，可以話喺香港發展 Compassionate Systems 咧一個好重要嘅一個新嘅里程碑。今年5月咧，我哋終於邀請到 Centre for System Awareness 裏面當中 Peter Senge 同埋佢嘅團隊咧嚟到香港去主持呢一個為期3日嘅入門培訓，而 Dr. Mehta Bull 咧就係透過線上當時同我哋去交流嘅。喜出望外嘅係咧，大家都見到張相，有230位嚟自香港同埋亞洲嘅其他嘅教育工作者啦，願意花上3日去一齊去學習嘅。唔知參加咗3日入門培訓嘅介唔介意舉一舉手示意啊？係，多謝你哋咧願意去花呢個時間做呢個3日嘅學習之餘咧，依然嚟到呢度咧去同我哋去繼續去交流同學習。咁對於其他人嚟講，我點樣去解釋3日發生咩事呢？不如我哋就去好快睇一睇片，去感受下當中嘅一個情況。除咗呢個3日嘅入門培訓呢，我哋另外一個里程碑呢，就係啟動咗呢一個 Compassionate Systems 嘅香港實踐社群。原本諗住咧上完3日嘅入門培訓咧，等大家上山向大師學習完咧，就落山各自修行啦咁。咁但係咧喺活動之後，同唔同嘅學校老師去溝通咧，我哋覺得有必要咧去一齊召集起嚟，一齊去研究點樣繼續去學習同埋實踐。所以我哋當中咧，最終召集咗咧2間嘅小學、6間嘅中學， 當然8間嘅學校服務嘅學生啦，面對嘅處境都有好大嘅差異，但係我哋堅信咧，必然有互相學習同埋支持嘅地方。呢一個為期1年嘅歷程咧，我哋係今個學年啱啱啟動嘅，而我哋希望當中嘅參與嘅老師團隊咧，探索嘅唔單止係專業上嘅實踐，而更多喺個人層面點樣去融入 compassionate systems。去整合當中嘅學習同埋實踐經驗，可以同各界分享之餘咧，亦都一齊去探討究竟，尤其是喺香港去實踐呢樣嘢嘅話，有一啲咩特別嘅意義，又會遇上一啲咩特殊嘅機遇或者挑戰咧？咁其實9月先開始咧，我哋短幾個月咧，已經好快咧建立咗一個好好嘅 generative social field。當中咧可以話係有歡笑咧，亦都有淚水啦，亦都有好深切嘅一啲個人反思。而今日活動嘅結尾咧，我哋亦都邀請咗3位嘅老師代表咧嚟分享下佢哋當中嘅對於 compassionate systems 嘅一啲學習同埋感悟嘅。咁至於嚟到今日嘅活動啦，其實有270人報名，對我哋嚟講咧，絕對係喜出望外嘅。當中我哋在座有大概80%嘅咧係教育喺學校工作嘅同工啦，大概有40%小學、40%中學，亦都有呢一個大學、幼稚園、群育學校等等嘅代表。而我哋將近20%嘅參加者咧就係 NGO 同埋基金會嘅，亦都有其他對於 well-being 好關注嘅人啦。特別咧，亦都想感謝咧，我哋當中有啲學生咧係自己報名去一齊出席今日嘅活動嘅。咁我相信嚟得呢度嘅咧，都係希望尋求新嘅突破。究竟面對我哋香港近年好令人擔憂嘅一啲社會快樂指數啦、學生嘅社交同埋情緒抗逆力嘅排名啦，以至於憂鬱症等等嘅狀況，我哋點樣先可以真正了解當中幸福感最大嘅挑戰？真係去避免純粹做一啲治標唔治本嘅事情咧，而好好正視問題嘅核心咧。咁所以今日咧，我哋非常之榮幸可以邀請到 Dr. Metta Ball 咧，去親身嚟到香港咧，嚟我哋呢度去做一啲嘅分享。Metta 咧係 MIT System Awareness Lab 嘅共同創辦人同埋研究主任啦，亦都係 Centre for Systems Awareness 嘅共同創辦人同埋行政總裁，同時去兼顧咧呢個研究同埋實踐嘅部分。而佢本身嘅學術背景咧，絕對係跨領域嘅，包括係牽涉到進化生物學啦、社交情緒學習啦、系統思維啦等等啦，亦都喺世界各地同唔同嘅教育機構以至系統咧去合作嘅。咁而我邀請 Metta 上台嚟同我哋分享之前咧，先提一提大家。咁Metta 好希望咧，佢會先做少少嘅分享之餘咧，係好想咧係聆聽觀眾有一啲咩嘅意見同埋問題，然後佢再調整佢嘅分享嘅。咁大家咧係一來可以舉手發問啦，咁樣佢就可以直接可以同你做交流。但係如果想嘅咧，都可以咧透過呢一個 slido.com 1402468咧去遞交你嘅問題，無論係中文咧或者英文咧都可以嘅。咁我就會咧幫大家同 Metta 去發問，並且咧其實喺佢嘅分享啦，以至於稍後嘅 panel discussion 咧去做一啲嘅回應嘅。咁係啦，而接下嚟嘅時段啦 ，Metta 係會用英語分享嘅，咁所以需要戴上耳機嘅咧，可以麻煩你而家開咗個耳機啦。咁我哋事不宜遲咧，就邀請 Dr. Metta Ball 咧上到台嚟同我哋做分享啦。有請 Metta。
Thank you very much, Anjali. And I could hear the Cantonese and get the translation at the same time. And I'm very fascinated by your language. So I wish that I was able to actually address you in the beautiful language that you have, but alas, I don't even know one word. I wrote down the timing for today because we have different segments, and everybody knows that once I'm on stage, I can continue to speak for a long time. So I'll try to I'll try to keep myself on track. It's very good to see you. May I see a raise of hand again who went through an introductory workshop as I was sitting with my back to most of you? Okay, it's just helpful to know. So, very good to be here. This is my first visit in Hong Kong. And the work, of course, has been growing here for a while. So mostly with everybody that I've had the opportunity to work with in Hong Kong, they've come to other places, to MIT or other places where we've done the work and where I've been directly involved. Or I've met you through a Zoom connection, as you can tell, with a somewhat wobbly, pixelated image, apparently, where, you know, usually during our workshops, our introductory workshops, I have the little segments on, you know, the more sciencey bits of the work that I come and share about. So it's lovely watching the film here. I recognize some of you who are, you know, starring in the film. And I'm very proud of my team of just, you know, it's lovely seeing them, how they're introducing and carrying themselves. So it's great to be here. I'm really pleased with that. Last night I was here on the same stage. Any of you here last night? Okay, so a couple of you came back. That's a good thing. I was here because I was invited by the school and by Dr. Daphne Ho to address the parent population here at the school. And it was a very interesting conversation and great questions that we had. Today our focus will be a little bit different because I've been asked to talk about, you know, this whole notion of well-being and particularly why we have, you know, failing well-being for our young people almost everywhere in the world. And for my part, my primary motivation for working in the field of education is that our young folks are not well. I am a mother myself. My kids are young adults, they're in their 20s. And I'm also a grandmother. And I'm really, I have 2 grandchildren, 2 and 4 years old. That I'm very proud of. And I'm also incredibly concerned about the world that they're growing up in. And particularly, you know, how not only they will be, I feel that we maybe have the skills, I maybe have the skills to protect my own, but what about all the people that they will be around? If they're growing up with this failing well-being, there's so much stress, anxiety, and depression. And that is extremely contagious. And it also is very, very hard for us to take collective action on the big themes in this world, the big things that we all really should be focusing on, like climate change, you know, our collapsing ecosystems and our oceans that are dying out of fish and so on and so forth. And all those great themes that are summarized maybe in the UN sustainability goals and so on, we can't take action if we're consistently, you know, stressed and burned out, if we're anxious about the world, operating out of fear and depressed. It's very, very hard for us to come together and have a meaningful understanding of what's needed in order for us to work together to create a different future. So my best bet in all of this is to work with the young people as closely as we can to provide them, but we can't know what the world is going to look like. Our education system, by and large, is still teaching them as if the future looks like the past. It's important to get a good education, and then you'll grow up, and you'll have a family, and you'll have a job, and then you'll have children, and you'll have this, and you'll have that. But at the same time, all those norms are crumbling around our very ears and eyes. We're seeing the collapse of the world as it used to be, and nobody knows what's going to come. All we can know is that it'll be profoundly different from what we've grown up in. And it'll be very uncertain. It's a very uncertain future that we're looking at, which is one of the key reasons when we ask the children, that is one of the key reasons why they're stressed and fearful. Because they're just not They don't have the adequate tools and practices to deal with the world as they see it. They're already with a foot in the future. They're global little citizens in our time today, and they know what's going on. And we don't equip them with the right strategies and tools and practices and thinking skills that are needed for the world that is to come. For example, we still do school as if we have all the knowledge, we the grown-ups have all the knowledge that we can now fill into them, and as if that's what they're going to need. But it's really not, because most things they can watch on YouTube or Google, and then AI can do the rest. So the types of education that we need for the future are ones where not only do we know ourselves and know who we want to be and come to understand something about where I am in all of this, but it's also about synthesizing all the creative skills that the AI and the machine learning won't be able to do. All the ways in which we, the humans, can be extremely creative and, take things to a different level, see patterns, and understand something about, learn from each other in a different way than our AI programs ever will be able to. But we're not teaching our kids to do that. And in part, what this framework, the Compassionate Systems framework that we're working with, in part what that does is provide young people with tools and practices and strategies for thinking and feeling and operating differently. Not that we are educating them for we don't know what is to come, but at least we know something about what's needed for the future. And one of those skills basically is to be able to self-regulate and to have, not be overwhelmed by the state of the world, to not be overwhelmed by fear and anxiety and the pressure of when we look at what's going on in the world. And the only way we can do that is through an intentional focus on not just me as a human being, but cultivating my own emotional literacy. You saw in the video we're working with, basic emotions and what does that feel and look like and so on, but also something about then, okay, so what do I do when I experience these emotions? How do I show up with them? And in most cultures I work in, there is still a tendency that when kids experience emotions, we kind of try to bypass what the experience actually is with something that's a little more acceptable as a cultural norm. For example, it's very acceptable for girls to be sad but not to be angry. Is that like that still in Hong Kong, or did some of you grow up with that? That girls are not supposed to be angry. But boys, on the other hand, are not supposed to be sad, but they can be angry. Boys don't cry and all that. Anybody grew up like that? So what we, in effect, do when we tell our kids, don't be sad, it's not that bad, suck it up, or pull yourself together, we're telling them that we're dismissing the experience that they have instead of teaching them how to be with that experience in a constructive way. So we're basically telling them, what you're experiencing right now is wrong. So go and try and find out some other way that's more culturally acceptable so that I can be in relationship with you. And that is extremely harmful for little humans. It's extremely harmful for all of us, but most of us have conditioned for decades in this room, have conditioned so that we've learned to work around not having to actually experience our emotions. The thing is that when we're not able to experience what we term, and you heard Maggie in the video, there's no such thing as negative emotions, they're all just emotions. It's how we deal with them as they show up that can be very challenging. The thing is, when we don't know how to deal with the challenging emotions or the challenging emotional states that we experience, when we effectively are asked to put a lid on it and try to make it into something else, we're also not actually capable of connecting with joy or being, in a space where we can be open to whatever is coming our way. So we're shutting off some emotions, means that we're basically shutting off our ability to experience life fully. And that's directly a direct cause for this failure of well-being. It's not the only one, but it's one of them. So in this session today, I've been asked to talk about well-being, and I should probably say just a few words. I came to this work not as an educator, but as a biologist, and I've been studying, not only the evolution of complex social systems, so I've been studying how other species do things, but also studying how moods and feelings are transmitted in human interactions. So really trying to understand something about how do we actually consistently impact each other. And most of us have an experience of it that we consistently we know when people are not feeling bad, when they're not nice being around, when we come into a space and somebody just had a fight and there's almost like electricity in the room still. All of that is directly impacting us because we're a profoundly social species. So we'll talk a little bit about this whole notion of generative social fields that was also mentioned in the video, that we really want to encourage people to focus on at the heart of education, instead of getting the best grades or putting too much pressure on yourself or teaching to the test or whatever it is that we're doing. The most important skill sets that we can give our young people today is for them to come to know themselves so that they know how they can navigate not only what's growing in their own systems, but also how they're relating with other people. But let me say something about this, the failures of well-being. Over the last 30 years or so, there's been a kind of a growing scientific process focused on well-being. It wasn't something that we talked about beforehand. But about 30 years ago, there was conversation about how come that we in the Western cultures, the Western science cultures, we're so good at talking about everything that can be wrong with the brain. So we know a lot about the brain when it's taken by fear. We know a lot about neuroscience of fear and anxiety. We know about the brain and depression, the brain and schizophrenia, the brain, when we're stressed out and so on. But we really know very little about what constitutes a healthy mind. And I'm always kind of curious. I know in the ancient Chinese tradition, you would go to the doctor to keep you healthy and not go to the doctor because you were sick, because your doctor's job was to keep you healthy. And so I'm just wondering why it's so clear that we know all these outliers of the brain, but we've never really, until about 25 years ago or so, started to focus on what does it mean to have a healthy mind. We didn't know anything about that. But fortunately, that has changed. We work and have been, inspired by the work at the Center for Healthy Minds. Originally, 25 years ago when it was established, it was called the Center for Investigating Healthy Minds at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Some of you might know Dr. Richie Davidson, who is the professor there. It's now called just the Center for Healthy Minds, so they dropped the investigating. I think they felt that now they've done enough of that and could actually say something about what is a healthy mind. And Richie talks about 4 failures of well-being. Now, I personally feel that there are more than these 4, but there are 4 dominant features that are really failures of well-being. And we'll talk just a little bit about that, because that might actually also be something that you recognize either from yourself or from people close to you, or maybe even from the kids that you work with or your children. The first failure is distractibility. How many of you have a device glued to your hand most of the day? I'm not talking about any of you, of course, but you've seen people with their devices, right? I took the train yesterday, everybody. It's just basically, we could have a phone instead of a hand, basically. It's quite intense. So the amount of information that we're constantly exposed to, our brains have not developed to evolve to deal with that. We're in a complete state of overwhelm most of the time. And what that means is that the buffer, when something comes our way, when there's adverse situations in our life, the buffer is very, very small because we're already overloaded. Distractibility is basically that we're constantly not paying attention to what's going on in the here and now. but we're thinking about what's going to happen later, or 3 steps ahead and have to plan. How many of you have busy work days or school days? And then sometimes you have to wing it so you can get home, and there's something about dinner, and you have to prepare your kids for homework, and you also have another appointment, and you also need to have some family time, to whatever extent that is. Is that a lived reality for some of you? Yeah. And so most of the day we plan ahead to be sure that we can actually make all ends meet. And that consistently takes us out of the present moment, which means that we're not noticing what's going on in the here and now. That is a major factor that deprives us from a state of well-being. The more we're able to pay attention to what we're doing in the moment, the greater a sense of satisfaction and nourishment. That is why our work is infused with mindfulness practices and grounding and so on. It's basically just to allow ourselves to be present to whatever is, so that we can pay attention to what's coming in through our senses and not being dragged around by our plans and hijacked by the emotions of everything, all the stuff we didn't get to do, all the ways in which we feel that we failed ourselves and our families every day, and so on and so forth, because we have such busy lives. So the distractibility comes in many forms. Of course, the most prevalent one in our time is all the binging and dinging that comes from our devices. So we're in the middle of a conversation and the phone goes ding. It doesn't even have to be your phone, but you're already somewhere else. That distractedness is not only depleting our sense of well-being, but it's also actually, over time, lessening our ability to focus and to concentrate on things. Studies have been made that it's not enough for you to not have your phone in your hand. There's still some of your cognitive processing that's dealing with the phone, even when it's on the table next to you. How many of you, when you sit down at a table to a meeting or over dinner, the phone is next to you? Some of your attention is on the phone. It's not enough we turn it upside down and turn the sound off. Some of our attention will still be entertained with what's going on our phone. It literally has to be in another room in order for us to be fully present to whatever the situation is that we're in. So you can see that that's the way we're constantly in relationship, where we're only partially there because some of our attention is on our devices and all the emails and all the messages and so on and so forth. It's very hard for us to actually be in connection in a deeper way, to be in relationship in a deeper way. So that's one of the failures of well-being. And it's hard to get out of, because not only are we caught in a loop where, I don't know about you all, but I have to remind my team consistently, when you're not doing your emails because you're doing something else, like I have, for example, been on the road now for almost a month, leading workshops and being in conferences and so on and so forth. So I have very limited time online, and I'm actually not on top of my emails. And it turns out the world has not imploded. It is actually possible for us to not attend to all the many, many messages that we get every day without grave, consequences. But somehow we've got dragged into an understanding that if we're not instantly there, if we're not replying to emails 24/7, everything will go wrong. How many of you remember when we only had landlines? The blissful days of landlines, when people tried to reach you and you weren't home. Too bad. They would have to try another time. I miss the days of landlines. When I was a kid and my friends called me, I would be out sitting somewhere with my dog under a tree reading a book. I wouldn't talk to them until the next day. And it didn't actually dramatically alter the world or the universe. It was totally okay that there was a slower pace and you weren't always able to reach people. Of course, now we've been conditioned to think that if people can't reach us instantly, we're not doing our work well, we're not showing up as we should, and so on and so forth. Think about it. It's really taking away from our sense of well-being, and our brains have not evolved to deal with it. So we're constantly in a state of overload, which makes us a lot more prone to anxiety. How many of you know about when you open the computer in the morning and you see all the emails and there's like a knot forming in your stomach? Yeah? Me too. I'm like, I try to avoid having to look at them. I have my assistant send me an overview of the emails I should pay attention to, and he tells me, here's a 5-minute thing I would like you to look at. And then a little later he sends me something. Here's something that might take 6 minutes I would like you to look at, so that we can kind of moderate it and I don't become totally overwhelmed by all the various things that I have to deal with every day. The second failure of well-being is, as Richie calls it, is loneliness. So we just had a pandemic of COVID, and we took really harsh measures to, I know it was tough in Hong Kong, all the isolation and very, very difficult to get to do things and so on. And then we came out of that pandemic and business as usual. But there is a hidden pandemic that is kind of overlaid with a lot of taboo, and it's the loneliness pandemic. And the irony is, of course, that we've never been more connected or seemingly connected through social media and through, our globalness in the world, and yet more and more people report a moderate to high degrees of loneliness on a daily level, particularly people of a certain age, and more prevalently for men, probably because there's a greater tradition for women to be cultivating their networks and their relationships. And loneliness is actually we the humans are an incredibly social species. I know we're doing everything to pretend that that's not the case, and my prosperous and my success and all of that is more important than everyone else's, but it's actually not the case. We're one of the most social species on this planet. So for us to not be in relationship, to not be in community, is very, very toxic. In fact, think about how much focus we have on obesity as something that will reduce your longevity of life. Loneliness is a much higher risk factor for that. People die of loneliness before they die of any of the other conditions that we're used to talking about. And it's sad because we can still be connected with our virtual friends or at a distance through social media, and constantly be occupied with what's going on in other people's lives and not experience a deeper sense of connection. But that's something that is very hard for us to talk about, and it's kind of taboo still. We need to talk about that because it's also affecting our kids. The third failure of well-being, as Richie talks about, is the negative self-talk and depression. Most of us set ourselves up for failure every day. We have way, way, way too high expectations of what we're going to accomplish in one day. Am I talking about me only, or do you know what I'm talking about? Way too many things that we think we can actually get done. And then when we're not doing it, we start beating ourselves up and say, well, it's just because, you shouldn't have been that lazy. If you'd focused a little more, you should have pull yourself together, get it going. You're supposed to be a better mom. You're supposed to be more present. You should be a better spouse, so on and so forth. Is this familiar territory to anyone? Yeah. If we spoke to our kids like that, our kids would really suffer from it. If we spoke to our friends like that, they probably wouldn't be our friends for very long. I'm just saying, if you kept kind of beating up your friends all the time for being really sucky friends, they probably wouldn't stay around unless they really wanted to be beat up. But we do that to ourselves. And it has as grave implications as if it was other people doing it to us. And that's directly correlated with the amount of stress, anxiety, burnout, and depression that people have. And we're constantly putting demands on ourselves that we can't meet, and we're beating ourselves up about it, not giving ourselves grace, not internalizing, self-compassion and care for ourselves is very harmful. And many of us have learned it through our parents. Many of us have grown up with mothers who would constantly tell themselves, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you have to strive more, and so on and so forth. Maybe dads have done that as well, but in most of the cultures I know of, it's been particularly targeted at women. We're supposed to constantly look like we could be at the cover of a magazine, and also being the perfect moms, and also being professionals, and also and so on and so forth. And because we constantly fail at all that, it's really good for fashion industry and for, makeup brands and all of that, because we constantly think that we need to buy our way out of not being good enough, but it's really, really unhealthy for ourselves. Is this resonating with people? We can kind of recognize that. Even if it's not something that we can immediately appreciate for something that's happening to us, maybe we know about it in our families or friends or people that we're with. And this happens to our kids all the time as well. We're putting so much pressure on them. And in Hong Kong, I will say, you do a great job of putting a lot of pressure on the kids. And that's setting them up for failure. Because of course they can't live up to everything that they're supposed to be. And they can't figure out who they actually are in the midst of it because they're too busy. So now that'll be a negative reinforcing loop of setting them up for failure, so they start beating themselves up and telling themselves that they're not good enough, and they're not accomplished enough, and they're not achieving the things that they're supposed to do, and how will they ever be successful in life? Last year, a study came out from Harvard. It was the longest study on human success in history. So it's been 80 years. They've tracked a group of people for 80 years and looked at more than 200 different measures of success, like, physical health and well-being, job, stature in life, if you're married, if this and that. There is one defining factor for success that overrides everything else. It doesn't have to do with you being wealthy or not, or if you're successful in your job, or if you have a high status position or anything like that. The number one defining factor of human success is the quality of relationships. I'll just repeat that. The number one defining factor of human success is the quality of relationships. Now, if we're constantly beating ourselves up about not being good enough, and we're constantly distracted so that we can't really be in relationship, and there's this tendency that we withdraw because we don't know how to be in connection, that's not something we're practicing, because we do everything to avoid the truth about what it means to be a human, namely to be an incredibly social species that needs to be in exchange with other humans in order to thrive and flourish and feel well-being. Then we're perpetuating a very, very negative cycle that is depleting the well-being, not just of our kids, but sucking it out of our societies in general. The fourth failure of well-being, as Richie talks about it, is lack of sense of purpose. Now, we're really good at talking about purpose as something that we can kind of impose on other people. The meaning of education is that you're supposed to, have, in the US we call it college to career readiness. It's really important that you go to a good school and get good grades so you can get into a good university and get a good degree so that you can get a good job. But if there isn't a sense of purpose connected to this, we're pretty lost. And it doesn't bring us any sense of joy in life or meaning in life. And if we can't live with a sense of purpose and meaning, we can't really find happiness. Happiness is a fleeting state that can arise from time to time. The deeper underlying emotional landscape that we're seeking to grow and cultivate is to be content and satisfied with our own lives. Having a sense of meaning and purpose does that for people. When I'm doing something where I can feel this is right for me, I'm on my path, it doesn't actually matter when adversity hits because I'm still on my path. It doesn't mean that we can't have suffering. Of course we can. And the idea that people can be happy all the time is something that was invented in Hollywood, and I wouldn't really recommend going down that route because that's just not who we are. But we can be content and satisfied and feel that there's purpose in our life. That is the greatest gift that we can give to ourselves and to our kids. And yet, in most education systems that I work in, it is completely overlooked. It is just not conversations we have with our kids. Who are you? Every single human being is a unique creation on this earth that's only here for a little time. All of us, all of our kids, they all can find, and I know in the ancient Chinese tradition we talked about the prenatal seeds, what they were born into this world, who they were born into this world to become. And yet we've taken that notion entirely out of education. There is nothing that guides them on the way to find out who they are. On the contrary, parents and educators primarily try to constantly put boxes over them to tell them who they are and what they should be in order to be successful. But if you end up in a really good position and it has no meaning to you and no sense of purpose, my claim would be that that's not actually what success is all about. Success is about living a life where when you're about to part out of this life, when you're on your deathbed, you can look back and be grateful for what it was and have meaning and purpose, and I did what I was supposed to do. That's what I would like to see for all humans. I think the world would actually look incredibly different if that was a focus that we had. So those are basically what Richie calls the 4 failures of well-being. I see many of you are taking notes. Why don't you just chat to the 1 or 2 people next to you about what resonates here? Is it challenging to hear? Is this, like this was not what I came to hear and I don't actually want to know all this? Or is there something that really resonates with you that you would like to explore? Take a couple of minutes, just chat to the people around you. Thank you very much. Does anybody want to share just a few kind of questions or insights? What are you actually talking about right now? It would be great for me to hear, and also for the rest of the group to hear what's transpiring in the different conversation.
I was just sort of, I was talking with Paris here, we were saying how of those 4 things that you just listed out, as educators in this room, as leaders in schools, I wonder how many of those 4 things are actually in focus when we talk about how we apply our structures and our systems in schools. We're driven by metrics of performance, expectation, assessment, yada, 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 yada. Edge about what edge about, right? But how much are we actually focusing our teachers on connecting with students, our students connecting with each other, and making sure those relationships are super strong? And you've just said they're the 4 key metrics. Are we looking at the picture upside down?
I think that's the right question to ask. Thank you. Other reflections? Yeah?
Just build on that, Chung and I were talking about something quite similar, and we also said that one of the, I guess, real sort of concerns is that if we do that and start looking at the picture the other way around, which we really want to aspire to do, is the world going to really be ready for the students that we produce based on that? And I think in an ideal world, then that would be the absolute dream. But in reality, is that then going to set them up for something down the line that's not maybe ready for that? Are they still going to need the metrics? Are they still going to need, if I think about my child, she's 3 years old. She's still little. I obviously don't know what the world is going to look like. However, am I confident that the world is going to be ready for a child as an adult, like you just said over there? I don't know. That's sometimes a bit of a fear, I guess.
Yeah, I get that. What you're alluding to is a very strong mental model about what education should be. Now, there's a lot of research showing that academic performance goes up when social-emotional well-being goes up, which is none too surprisingly. When we're caught by fear and anxiety and under pressure, it's much harder to learn. However, what we, the educators, have to give up is controlling our kids. It requires that they have some sense of agency and that we allow them to become empowered. Now, many of us would probably like for our kids to be able to take leadership in their own lives And most of us would like for them to postpone that until they're actually adults. But here's a little secret. If they're not practicing this when they're young, then they won't be able to do that when they're older. And I can't tell you how many business leaders I have coming up to me in various settings around the world being like, they're almost unemployable. Because they have no idea how to be in relationship. They don't know how to, fail without it being a dramatic incident. I don't know about you all, but I've had significant amount of failure in my life, and I've grown from every single situation. And yet we're trying to tell them that they have to be, that there is the answer to the questions that we pose, and there is a right way to be about everything. And it has nothing to do with what they sense inwardly, it's just something that we're mandating for them. It is not a human-friendly approach to education. Yeah, thank you. So, we'll have more time for conversation. But one of the key factors of systems thinking is this notion that structure shapes behavior. And what you were just alluding to before is, the structure in place keeps producing the outcomes. The structure, the outcomes that we see. The outcomes that we're seeing from education today are outcomes of burnout, teachers and kids both, of stress, anxiety, depression, galloping suicide rates for young people all over the world. We're the only species on this planet where our young people are taking their own lives. That is feedback from the system that we have to listen to. We've constructed our societies in ways where our kids basically do not know how to fit in. Some of them develop coping strategies and are able to go through it, and some of them can't. And probably they're the ones who are the most creative thinkers, the most sensitive kids, the ones who could really be innovative under the right circumstances and create wondrous and new pathways for humans going forward if we listen to what the feedback from the system is. The structure of education was never designed to produce outcomes of well-being. It was designed, many of you will know this, I'm not saying something new, it was designed for working class people to be good factory workers in industrialized society. The wealthy people, the people on top of the hierarchies back when this system was designed, were doing math, not doing all the reading and writing and math and arts. Of course they learned that, but it was, the creative arts and reading poetry and being in nature and so on and so forth. Because that's what's a fulfilling human experience, for us to be able to open our senses and explore the world from that lens. And now what we've done is we've tried to add layers onto the structure of education. We've tried to add ways in which we can, have a little more social-emotional learning, for example, or positive education, I know has been a big thing in Hong Kong, and so on. But if we're not changing the structure, the outcomes that it's producing are consistently going to be the same. When we talk about structures, what we really mean is how we're thinking about things and feeling about things and acting upon those things and the artifacts that we produce. Now, what does that mean? Our mental models are basically the lenses through which we're capable of seeing the world. It's almost like glasses we're wearing without knowing it. We're culturally immersed. How many of you have traveled to other countries? Have you sometimes been shocked at how other people do things? I'll tell you, last night when I was standing here, I grew up in Denmark, and I kind of casually dropped the line that Denmark, people have 6 weeks of paid vacation per year, and 1 year paid maternity leave. And when people go on vacation over the summer, and I'm shocked about this because I also live in the US, they actually don't even have an auto reply on their emails. They just don't answer. And I literally have had my colleagues from the US, when we work with people in Denmark, they're like, has something happened to them? Are they okay? Did they die? What happened? Because they're not replying to their emails. They're just not answering for 3 weeks straight because they're on their summer vacations. It's also known as one of the happiest countries in the world. People go home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because they have to pick up their kids. They do their own cooking. And they usually have, time over dinner to sit and chat with their folks and their kids. And sometimes maybe they'll work a little bit in the evening, but it's very common that you close your computer at 4 o'clock and then you go home and you have free time. And the country still exists. This is possible. So it's just, that can be a shocking mental model for us to even try to aspire to something like that when we're immersed in a very, very different culture, where we think success, a mental model, I dare you all, a mental model that is very strong in Hong Kong is that if you're a conscientious human being that wants success in your life, you have to work really hard. And if you're not busy, you're not doing it right. It's good to be busy, because then we know that you're doing everything you can. You deserve something when you're busy. And if you're not busy, that's not the case. We can kind of recognize that? These are just mental models. Mental models in place produces the artifacts that we're creating. So the mental model of school being a place where we send our kids as empty vessels so they can be full of knowledge by a teacher standing in front of the room is a very, very powerful mental model because it's intergenerational. Parents went to school. It's not supposed to be fun. You're supposed to learn math and science and reading and writing. You're supposed to get a good degree so you can get a good education and get a good job. That is a very strong mental model in most places in the world. And because our parents also went to school and they had a similar shared experience, we keep kind of pushing that forward, which means that we consistently develop our schools as the artifacts, as the physical manifestations of how we're thinking about things. With classrooms, often most classrooms in the world are still kids in rows, teacher in front of the room, and so on and so forth. They can just Google everything and then within a couple of minutes watch a video on YouTube and learn basically what they need to learn. It's not a very adequate mental model we have about education any longer. The kids know that, so they disconnect. Even in the best schools I come to. In primary schools, not so much, because there's still there are still sensitive little humans who haven't entirely been conditioned by the education system. But when we get to secondary school, they start disconnecting. And what if we had the radical thought that if kids could volunteer if they wanted to go to school, what would school need to look like? If it wasn't actually something we did to them every day. If we didn't force them into this system, do you think many of them would show up? My question is always, as we're working in this way, is what would it take to create a system of education where kids would show up voluntarily, where they would really want to be? And imagine this type of learning that could come out of that, the joy that would be in a space like that, if that's how they get up in the morning and where they really want to go. That's my aspiration for education. And I promise you that their mental health and well-being will increase dramatically, and their ability to learn and reflect and have critical thinking and explore all the skill sets that are needed for the future would be at the heart of a system of education like that, because otherwise the kids wouldn't show up. We're born curious learners. And sadly, I was part of a big initiative in the US prior to COVID over several years. They collected all of the people who are, the primary scientists in the fields of learning and development. And basically the bottom line is that everything we know about the science of learning and development is the opposite of how we've created school. Kids are not designed to sit down and learn passively. They're designed to play and explore. That's the human condition. How many of you have play and exploration in your curriculum? Great, lovely. We are all supposed to have choices and agency in how we want to learn, because that motivates our learning. In fact, if we're not interested and we don't have a kind of an intrinsic motivation to learn, we can't learn. It just doesn't stick. That's the whole emotional underpinning of what learning is, and so on and so forth. So isn't it kind of wild that we know all we need to know about the science of learning and well-being, and everything we're doing in our kind of classical structure of school is the opposite. And then we don't know why our kids are not thriving, why we're not cultivating well-being. So that's a very ingrained mental model that keeps us repeating the same pattern, even though we know that it kind of doesn't actually produce the outcomes that we'd like to see. Now, for us, this notion of generative social fields is what we would like to see at the heart of education. And of course, as I shared, I'm a biologist and I'm also a behavioral biologist, and then I studied philosophy of nature. And that means that I'm trying to look at all the parallel structures. You know, evolution is a pretty smart process, has been around since the beginning of life, basically. Evolution thrives with diversity and variation. And everything we try to do is standardize what it means to be a human. You have different learning styles, then you have to have a separate learning plan, and you can't fit into the regular education system. Nature grows through diversity and variation, and that's what creates resiliency. All the most resilient ecosystems on this planet are the most diverse. That is also the case for the human condition. The more diversity, the more we can learn from each other, the more it's possible for us to be with people who learn differently, who feel differently, who think differently, the more we can grow. So what we need to understand is something about what it means to be this embodied human system, the mind-heart-body system. That's where the emotional literacy comes in. What am I experiencing right now? What's the information that's coming from my body? How can I map my kind of inner landscape so I know who I am in this world and how I'm operating? Because the fact is that since we are such a profoundly social species, we are constantly influenced by the people around us. And we, in return, constantly influence other people. So that's the relational system. Our personal, emotional systems consistently influence the relational systems we're in. Which means that when I show up with anger, fear, depression, anxiety, what am I bringing into the social fields I operate in? Oh, anger, fear, depression, anxiety. Even if I'm trying to put a lid on it, it's still leaking out at all times and kind of expressed in my actions and my behaviors. That influences all the other people around me. So one of the ways that this is really growing is because it's extremely contagious. When kids have friends that are stressed and anxious, they are much more likely to become stressed and anxious themselves. There are closed groups on Instagram and on TikTok and so on, where kids are sharing ways in which they harm themselves. And it spreads like wildfire. It's extremely contagious because we're such a social species. But because we haven't developed our emotional literacy or our relational literacy, we don't really know how we're influenced all the time. Now, the challenging thing about being a human being is, of course, that with all these emotions that are constantly happening in me, they're also happening in other people. And when we don't know our own emotional systems, it's really challenging being with other people sometimes. Sometimes we meet people and we love them instantly and we think, oh my God, this is a karmic connection or something. You tried that? It's just like, wow, I'm so inspired. This was great. We were meant to be. Right? And then sometimes it's the opposite. And you meet someone and you're like, you just wish they would go away immediately and you never have to see them again. Is that just me? No? So we respond immediately to how we feel about other people. A study came out a couple of years ago, actually. It was published, I read about it in Harvard Business Review. They had done a study about people who were hiring other people. How long it took for them to make the decision of whether or not the person who came for the interview was eligible for hire. How long do you think it takes? I'm sitting here at my desk waiting for people that I'm supposed to interview. How long do you think it takes before people have made up their minds about whether or not this person is even eligible for hire? 30 seconds. You don't even have to say anything, because I know, I feel it in my gut, right? And what is that? Those are just conditioned responses and lack of understanding of why we respond in that way. So our habitual way of operating steers our lives, and we're confined by that. Because maybe this person who came in reminded you of somebody who yelled at you when you were 5 years old, and now you can't hire them. Really, people? That is how decisions are made in our lives. And they actually don't have to be. So if we cultivate this understanding of ourselves, we can make decisions about how we want to show up and how we want to influence the fields that we're in. And if people around us also have that, then we can make decisions and have intentionality about wanting to show up with greater care and kindness, with showing up with a sense of respect and self-agency, with care for myself so that I'm actually able to care for others, and so on and so forth. That should be at the heart of education. That's what the human experience could be. And what we've somehow deviated from to an extent where we're not doing a very good job of being humans. And our kids can't live here, and our kids don't have well-being. Probably we don't really have it either, but those of us who have managed to, suck it up and push through, we're so out of touch with what it means to be a healthy human being for most parts, that it's very, very hard for us to cultivate this unless we really make an effort. Now, this is how large systems are shaped. They're shaped by individuals coming together in relationships, and that's how the classrooms is created, and the teams, and the family structure, and also, our schools, our institutions and organizations, and society at large. All the institutions that we're abiding to, all the systems and structure that are out there in our societies are not magically dumped at us. We co-create them every day, and then we reenact them. We contribute to keeping them at bay or in place because we think that's just how it's supposed to be. That's what our mental models are. 300 years ago, it was the rights of king that was granted by God in Europe. That was the mental model people had. Turned out that it wasn't actually magically or God-given, and that could be overturned so that people could make choices about their lives. So all the ways in which we're consistently contributing to the types of structures, like we just talked about, structures of education, we might not like it, but we have to do it because that's the way it is. We're being dragged into it instead of allowing ourselves to have agency and take action in a rightful way so that we can co-create structures that have outcomes of care, compassion, and human flourishing and greater well-being and collective action to take responsibility of our planet and of the people around us. That is actually possible. And so this notion of a generative social field, for our vision for education is, if that's at the heart of education, as I said in the video, then kids will come into school every day and they'll know that there's somebody who cares about them. And they'll know that they have agency and that they're there as their unique selves and they don't have to try to pretend to be someone else than they are. And they can feel seen in who they are. And they can have, choices about how they want to learn and how they're able to be there in a good way. That's how we can human a lot better than what we're doing at the moment. And so for us, if we can create those kinds of spaces, that is the highest leverage for what we call compassionate systems change. It's not enough, though, it's increasingly, my awareness about this has increased dramatically, particularly since COVID. Focusing in education alone is not enough. We have tasked our educators to be in charge of well-being of kids. And now we're blaming school and the education system that that's not happening. And most teachers were never trained to deal with this in the first place. Most teachers are under tremendous pressure themselves, way, way, way too busy, and lacking mental health and well-being is very prevalent in most of the education systems I'm in. This is not a matter for education. We all need to be allies with educators and make this a matter for society. When our little ones cannot thrive, then it's a matter for society. How else can we have functional systems going forward? Of course we can. And that is not for education alone. I think that kids from a very early age should learn these tools and practices and strategies that are universal human strategies, that are all science-based, that are integrated into this compassionate systems framework. But I think the rest of society has to do so as well, the governance structures, our healthcare systems, and so on and so forth, because it's just not enough to focus on education alone. Back to the comment on what then when they come out into the world. I will say, however, we receive a lot of the most well-achieving students at MIT, where I have my lab every year, and it's become such a theme for our faculty there that they are completely lost. They've achieved the highest grades, they've gone through all the harshest conditions of education to get to the best university in the world, and they have no idea why they're there. And they are so messed up, generally speaking. It used to be when I started working at MIT, everybody had a kind of a sense of, almost everybody had a sense of, I'm at MIT because I want to do good things in the world. That was the kind of the general norm and how we were there together. That's not the case any longer. You ask them why they're there, all they know is that they had they could push themselves hard enough to get the best grades so that they were able to get the scholarships to go to MIT. Many of them are from Hong Kong and China. A lot of those kids, they have no idea what they're doing there, they have no idea how to spend their time or what to do and how to contribute, and they're really profoundly lost. So we're sending them out into the next system of education, next layer of system of education, and we formed a huge well-being initiative at MIT because we're just not sure what to do with them. They're not thriving, they can't learn, they can't explore, they can't be innovative, they can't do all the things that are signifiers for what we're supposed to do at MIT, have kind of creative learning skills and have curiosity and interest and exploration and not be afraid to fail and try out things and the whole kind of lab culture that we're famous for. The new generation of kids are just not very capable of all that because they've been pushed so hard through the system that they never ever had a time to stop and reflect. Figure out what they would like to do. So this is our suggestion for if we are to redesign the system of education, should be with this focus. And let's see what else we might be able to do as a species on this planet. Because right now, I'm speaking as a biologist, and I'm sorry to say all this, but we also we follow all the patterns of species that go extinct. There's a lot of mapping done on that, and we actually do. We are killing our own habitats, and our kids can't thrive. I'm sure we can do better than this. That's probably my last comment. So, time for questions. Are there any questions, comments, reflections?
So in the Slido, there's a question that says, as an emotional educator, how can we respond to educators who think focusing on relationships is a waste of time?
Fire them? Is that a bad answer? No, well the thing is, and here's the thing, I don't know what the turnover rates look like in Hong Kong, but in most systems we work in, and I should probably introduce this, but we work statewide in the state of California. I've been on the state budget there for 7 years. We work province-wide in the province of British Columbia and Canada, and then we have a lot of different spaces in the world where we're really working, with all layers of the system of education. In most places, there is huge turnover rate. The general length of time that a principal stay in place is about 2 years. Superintendent, who kind of oversees the districts, is about a year and a half, and so on and so forth. And what we see is that many of the educators who are probably the best at connecting with the kids tend to drop out of the system because it's just painful. And so many of the people who stay back in education are probably not the ones that we want to have teaching for this. Because they're the ones that no matter what new curriculum and what new initiative comes along, they have their way and they've become cynical over the years and so on and so forth. That might not be the case with your colleagues. I'm talking about people in other places. I'm just saying it might be possible here as well. Because the thing is that it's really painful if we really truly care about the kids and we see how much pressure they're under and we don't know what to do with it. Either we have to disconnect ourselves, or it generates a lot of what we call empathic distress. We don't actually know how to deal with the suffering that we are witnessing. And of course we get influenced by that on a daily basis. So when people have learned to disconnect from that, that's when you get up with situations that tell them that, cultivating relationship is not important. We're one of the most social species on this planet. If you look at all the other social species on this planet, like, whales or elephants or our dogs, for example, they can't live and function without each other, without being in relationship. And show them that Harvard study, it's easy to find, the longitudinal study of success in life, #1 defining factor, quality of relationship. Stuff that down their throats.
A follow-up question on the quality of relationship is, so how do we measure that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we started developing this framework, the Compassionate Systems Framework, 10, 12 years ago in collaboration with the IB at first and a lot of great educators from around the world. And then, of course, there's the constant question that we're always met with. I'm a scientist, I get that. How do you measure it, where the evidence, and so on. And we can have a lot of we can track a lot of really boring metrics like, kids stay in school longer, there's less absenteeism, and teachers don't get sick as much, I don't get as many angry emails from parents, so on. That's all good. But how do you measure quality of relationships or sense of belonging or, joy or love in a space? And so the reason why we established the lab at MIT, and I know I say it as if it was just so, it was hard work and it took a while, but the reason why we established it was because it became increasingly clear to me, if we're trying to develop a fully new paradigm, not just us, but many people are, a new paradigm for how we can live and breathe and be on this planet, we can't apply old paradigm metrics onto that. So right now, I'm in the process of developing a methodology where we can actually study some of these things. And to make that kind of valid as science will take a little while, but it's really, really worthwhile because what we're studying is how we human better. And I think that that's at least a worthy cause to be, trying to do. So it's in process. There are, indicators that we're looking for. We're looking for people's experiences. We're asking the kids. We see the buy-in and so on and so forth. But I would like to have something that's much more kind of comprehensive and expansive. One new thing that I don't know if it'll happen yet, but I recently met the vice president of LEGO. And LEGO is a Danish organization. And they've also been funding a lab at the Media Lab at MIT since its beginning. It's called Lifelong Kindergarten. So LEGO is all about play. One of the greatest indicators of a generative social field is when play happens. So my hope is that we can begin to develop studies of, when genuine play is taking place, what do we learn about the quality of the field? Because then we can begin to look for those indicators also in other types of learning spaces. Play is the most fundamental way for all social species to learn. When it's playful, we get to test and trial. We get to try out things and we have fun while doing it. That is the best way of learning possible, and it produces generative fields. So my hope is that LEGO will want to come on board with this, and when I get back to Denmark, I have a meeting with them to just explore what the possibilities are of merging this. So my hope is that we can begin to have, case studies in different schools and say, okay, we want to have a play-based learning. Our PI at our lab at MIT is studying play and learning, so it's a huge thing. He's part of the National Academy of the Sciences for Educators and so on in the US. So there's a lot of understanding about what that does, but we don't really know how to measure the quality of the fields. But if we know something about what we know is a generative field, and we can study that, then we can apply those measures to other fields as well. So that's the kind of journey that we're on right now. Yeah.
Thank you. So while we still have a lot of questions, I'd like to invite our three representatives to join the panel so that we can have the discussion.
All right.
為咗確保咧，我哋可以個 panel discussion 可以大家都用最舒服嘅語言去講咧，我哋三位嘉賓會用廣東話啦，然後 Meta 會繼續用英語嘅，咁所以如果需要耳機嘅咧，請戴上啦。So in order for everyone to be able to express themselves most comfortably, our speakers, our panelists would be also using Cantonese, so please wear your headsets. 咁首先就好多謝三位加入我哋呢一個嘅 panel discussion 啦，咁亦都容許我介紹一下三位啦。咁我哋有嚟自唔同學校嘅代表啦，咁佢哋擔當嘅崗位唔同，對於 compassion systems 嘅學齡咧都唔一樣啦。咁我哋有Dr. Daphne Ho 何建儀博士啦，係拔萃南書院嘅附屬小學校長，學習 compassion systems 有大概5年啦。本身咧同我一齊做同學咧，就完成咗呢個1年嘅 Master Practitioner 嘅課程啦。咁亦都好多謝咧DBS 咧係借出你哋嘅場地去俾我哋今日去用啦。接住落嚟，我哋有潘思清程詠詩副校長嚟自禮賢會彭學高紀念中學，學習 Compassion Systems 大概有2年到，俾啲掌聲。咁然後咧，我哋有Chubby妹梅朗森女士，係拔萃女小學嘅輔導員兼教師，學咗 Compassion Systems 咧有半年左右嘅。我諗三位咧頭先聽完阿 Meta 嘅分享咧，可能都有好多嘅感悟啦、反思啦，尤其是喺自己嘅學校嘅場景，可能都有唔同嘅一啲過應嘅地方。咁不如我哋先從阿 Vincy 講起先啦，因為我都知道 Vincy 咧其實對於 generative social field 咧都係你好中意嘅一個概念嚟嘅。咁我都好好奇喺你嘅學校度，你會對於呢一個概念有一啲咩嘅和應咧？
大家好。咁咧，首先點解我咁中意呢一個 generative social field 咧？其實因為我自己本身個人咧係好理性。咁咧以前咧我做嘢咧就係顧住做嘢嘅啫，即係對住啲事嘅，因為實在一日太多事要做。咁但係我發現咧咁樣其實一嚟自己個人咧可能就因然係有啲唔開心嘅。第二咧就係我發現咁樣其實係會撞板嘅，因為喺學校裏面咧根本我哋周圍都係人嚟，我哋面對同事咧都係人嚟。咁所以咧，當我早幾年真係親身去接觸呢樣嘢，我體驗到呢樣嘢咧，哇！原來真係有一啲好難言喻嘅感受係可以由個心底發出嚟嘅時候咧，咁我都好希望，尤其是我換咗一個新嘅工作環境啦，我都好希望喺呢一個工作環境裏面可以將呢樣嘢咧係 share 俾啲同事嘅。咁所以咧其實我就做咗幾樣嘢啦。咁第一咧就係我喺即係 CL 好多活動 ，CL 好多活動咧都有呢個 check-in 嘅活動咁樣。咁所以咧，其實我就嘗試咧喺學校裏邊一啲科組嗰度咧就引入呢個 check-in。咁就一開始嘅時候，我哋唔係討論 agenda，
咪討論啲項目，然後真係預留咧可能5分鐘、10分鐘俾大家去講一下佢當刻嘅一啲嘅感受。咁 check-in 有好多唔同 tools， 都試過引入一啲唔同嘅 tools 嘅。哇！咁咧我好 surprise 喎，做第1、第2次嘅時候咧，哇！大家係一路去 share 係好願意去 share 嘅。咁呢個都俾我睇得到，哦，原來同事咧都係好 treasure 同好中意呢啲嘅活動啦。咁所以咧，跟住我就再大膽啲咧，就係喺我哋嘅 staff meeting 咧都引入呢一樣嘢，咁就全體嘅同事咧都會去感受到呢一樣嘢咯。咁跟住而家我哋其實都有一啲 study group 咧係做 compassionate system 嘅。咁我都會係做呢啲 check-in， 而我發現咧，可能呢啲小報紙一點一滴咧，都令到我哋嘅 study group 咧係可以係一個好安全、好開放嘅環境底下咧，大家係好願意坦誠自己或者袒露自己一啲嘢咧，令到我哋嗰個關係無形中咧係建立得更加穩固。個原因係咧，我哋互相認識得大家更多，而嗰個認識係唔單止係工作上面做嘢，而係我哋整個人嘅認識。
我都聽你講過咧，你同同事喺交流當中可能出現一啲嘅衝突係難免啦，或者有一啲嘅誤解。咁好奇 Compassion Systems 嘅一啲概念點樣幫到你咧？
我諗頭先所講咧，我哋要留意自己嘅情感咧，呢個係我好認同嘅。頭先我都有 mention 過，我以前自己嘅性格就係我係好理性嘅。所以咧，我係好多用腦嘅。原來咧喺一個咁多用腦嘅情況底下咧，我係好難去接觸自己嘅感受。當我唔能夠體會到接觸嘅感受嘅時候咧，其實我好難體會人哋嘅感受。咁所以譬如最近有一次試演嘅經驗咧，就係其實我同個同事啦坐隔離啦開會啦咁樣。咁跟住咧我其他負責嗰樣嘢嘅同事咧就講咗個 policy， 跟住就講咗個 deadline。咁跟住咧，我坐我隔離嗰個同事咧，其實係一個好好嘅朋友嚟嘅。咁佢好大反應喎，即刻。咁跟住當刻咧，我就係以一個我以為自己係一個朋友，以一個朋友嘅身份咧去做一啲回應。我就話你咁傻嘅咁樣。哇！點知咧，佢更加嬲。咁我當下都係好 surprise 嘅。點解咧？做啲咩？即係點解會係咁樣咧？咁跟住咧，第2日咧。佢冷靜咗之後咧，就同我講翻點解當時佢咁嬲咧？原來咧，佢唔係佢期望我係咩咧？佢期望我係一個副校長嘅角色。當佢咁樣去講嘅時候咧，佢係 seek help， 佢係想我去幫佢。但係原來嗰陣時我係聽唔到佢呢一個聲音，我仲以為我好輕率咁樣就話你咁傻嘅咁樣，咁佢就覺得哇，你完全冇體諒到我。咁 Compassion System 裏面有啲乜嘢係幫到我咧？後來我哋再去睇去 reflect 嘅時候，嗰個 wheel of emotion 其實都係好重要。如果我當刻我係停一停，我係睇得到佢當時嘅情緒嘅時候，咁我可能未必會係咁啦。咁而同時間咧，就係當我當時聽到佢咁大情緒嘅時候咧，其實我自己原來我裏面咧都係有啲係覺得唔開心喎，或者覺得好奇怪、好驚訝喎，點解會咁咧？咁我覺得呢一個 wheel of emotion 都係可以幫我去做呢啲嘅 checking 咯。可能我都會有少少嬲喎，做乜咁大反應咧咁？咁再加上就係有個 ladder of influence 啦。咁當我哋再去睇嘅時候，原來點解大家會有呢啲唔同嘅情緒咧？就係原來大家嘅觀點唔同。我當時嘅觀點就係，我可能用一個朋友嘅角色，我諗住講下笑啫。因為實際上我同佢同一個 situation，我都係受住同一樣嘅制度我都要面對嘅。咁但係原來佢就唔係咁諗，佢嘅諗法係你係負責呢樣嘢嘅其中一個人，所以你應該要做呢啲嘢。咁當我哋大家呢啲觀點唔同嘅時候咧，其實就出現咗嗰個碰撞咯。咁如果有咗呢啲 tools 咧，其實係令到我哋比較，或者我自己啦，係比較容易啲去梳理到嗰件事，而少咗啲咩咧？而少咗啲頭先可能Meta 講嘅一啲 negative talk。 如果我冇呢啲嘅時候，我就會不斷去 blame 自己啦。哎呀，點解我咁差嘅？點解我連我呢個好好嘅朋友我都唔能夠關心到佢、體會到佢嘅情緒嘅？係咪我唔能夠履行到我一個副校長嘅角色咧？我係咪比起其他人差咧？即係我可以同自己講好多呢啲嘢咯。但係當我有咗嗰啲工具嘅時候，其實我係明白咗自己更多，而我亦都有能力，可能係或者佢都係有一個能力咧，就係我哋能夠喺一個平靜啲嘅情況底下咧，去令到互相去了解一啲我哋比較深層次啲裏面嘅一啲嘅睇法係點樣樣。
好多謝 Vincy， 即係正如你所講，就係話可能就住同一件事，我哋觀察到嘅嘢唔同，我哋嘅 mental model 唔同，好快我哋有個術語就係 climb up the ladder， 已經好快會有一啲嘅結論出咗嚟。但係如果可以了解當中牽涉嘅情緒，可能我哋可以慢慢從呢一個嘅推論嘅階梯咧，去走翻落嚟，去更好咁樣相處。所以多謝 Vincy 啦。咁我哋又問下 Toby 啦。好有趣，你係同時兼任呢一個輔導員同老師嘅角色啦。咁呢一個嘅背景喺你學習 compassionate systems 喺學校嘅場景，你又會有一啲咩觀察咧？
其實作為一位輔導員咧，我日日都見好多同學仔啦，即係都幾不幸嘅，即係佢哋有時候係真係會好大壓力啊，好多焦慮啊咁樣樣。咁就係頭先提到即係幸福感嘅缺失嗰幾個問題，佢哋真係面對呢啲情況。咁我好想幫佢哋，咁佢哋嘅家長同時可能都面對同樣嘅情況嘅，即係都係好焦慮、好大壓力咁樣樣。咁當時啦，有時我都覺得辛苦嘅，會有啲位，因為日日都見好多家長，見好多同學仔，咁所以頭先有一個好大嘅提醒，就係特別係一個學校嘅 well-being， 其實老師真係好重要咯嚇，所以老師要照顧好自己嘅 well-being， 咁我都覺得係啊，我好需要照顧好我個 well-being 先，咁我先可以服務好即係我嘅 client 啦，我嘅 client 就係即係同學仔家長咁樣樣。咁所以對自己都係要學習有好多 self-compassion。咁我知道一個好大嘅挑戰，即係我相信我都同大家一樣，即係教育工作者係每日嘅工作係好繁忙。咁但係我真係學識咗要改變一個心態，同埋頭先講嘅 mental model 一啲價值觀同埋信念啦，就係你抽呢個時間出嚟去照顧好自己，其實係好值得嘅，係為咗自己好。為咗學生好，為咗家長好，為咗成個學校好嘅，真係嘅咁樣樣。咁都想回應頭先有一位教育工作者個問題，就話如果啲老師唔着重，即係佢哋個 mental model， 佢哋嘅信念或者價值唔着重關係，咁點樣樣咧？咁樣樣，其實呢個係真係需要喺經歷裏面去改變嘅，因為我參加咗，雖然我年資係比較淺啦，我係上年5月先參加咗 training 嘅。咁即係都好坦白講，我一開始參加嘅時候，我都有啲掙扎嘅。即係都榮幸啦，即係我哋學校係被揀選係其中8間學校嘅一間學校係可以有1年嘅跟進啦咁樣樣。咁最初我都會諗，哇，都幾大 commitment 㗎喎！我哋每個月都會有 gathering 咁樣樣，咁都好多嘢做。但係當開始呢個 journey 呢個歷程，呢一個真係一個成長一個 growth 嘅 journey， 我係覺得係好值得嘅，因為係真係感受到頭先提到嘅，即係 generative social build 啦，係團隊裏面係我哋一開始都講得好清楚嘅，即係團隊裏面嘅校長有副校有我呢啲即係普通嘅老師啦，但係真係好信任，真係可以好敞開去講到自己嘅感受。同埋掙扎就係呢啲信任，日積月累，呢啲嘅聯繫日積月累去建立到團隊嗰個關係，咁係一方面係好 meaningful 啦，同埋係覺得好得力咯，即係揾翻自己嗰個初心點解會投身喺學校，同埋係真係好開心，我哋係真係有笑有淚嘅，即係呢啲嘅分享裏面，大家係會一齊流淚。一齊去有共鳴嘅，即係對於我哋面對嘅掙扎，而有好多好好嘅即係 tools 啦，係啊，咁我哋亦都會一齊去分析一啲問題，即係校長就帶領我哋去開始去應用啦，喺 compassionate system 裏邊學到嘅一啲工具咁樣，咁我哋喺 school development team 嘅 meeting 裏面 就會帶一啲 case 出嚟，用嗰啲工具去大家去討論分析。咁呢個都係好好，因為真係大家好真心、好願意去敞開，我哋亦都唔介意去分享我哋面對有咩問題嘅。所以呢個歷程係我覺得好值得啦，同埋係即係都好感激有呢個機會去學習咯。
我諗 Tabby 頭先都講到好多嘅重點，第一樣嘢都經常老師學習嘅時候，佢第一個嘅 budget 係 self-care is not selfish。self-care is not selfish。因為正如嗰個 social field 當中，如果大人係知道要關顧自己嘅話，學生都會透過呢一種嘅 model 嚟去明白。第二樣嘢就係話，係咪真係所謂叫唔關心關係嘅人係真係唔關心啊？定係佢其實未有機會感受得到呢？咁會唔會係透過感受可以改變到佢嘅觀念呢？所以好多謝 Tabby 嘅分享啦。Daphne， 我諗相對而言，你喺呢個學習嘅旅途係長少少啦，但係我都知道係要繼續學習嘅。咁但係喺你嘅觀察，作為學校嘅領導，其實去推動呢一種嘅心態嘅改變，所謂嘅 compassionate systems change 喺學校嘅所謂切入點嘅時候，應該點樣開展？點樣開始？你有啲咩諗法呢？
大家好，歡迎大家嚟到我哋學校啦。咁其實都係好有趣嘅，即係學習呢一個 compassionate system 係幾年嘅時間啦。咁我又咁啱呢幾年時間都有幾個唔同學校嘅經驗。咁即係當Angeline 嘅邀請我今日會分享嘅時候，咁我就喺度諗翻原來我喺每間學校嘅切入點其實都好唔同咯。因為我諗係當我哋真係即係就算一樣幾好嘅嘢，我哋要帶到去學校，其實都要睇下喺學校裏面即係大家個狀況係點，因為每間學校嗰個情景都有啲唔同㗎。咁我記得喺第一間學校一間小學啦，咁我哋開始嘅時候都真係開始將呢一個 practice 分享俾我哋嘅同事。先啦，咁好似 Vincy 咁啦，我哋就係有一啲 staff development 嘅 program， 我哋就開始用一啲 check in 嘅方法去開展啦，咁製造好多唔同嘅機會俾同事傾偈啦。因為真係即係頭先 Matt 都講，我諗冇人會覺得我哋而家做呢行係唔忙㗎，即係人人都忙得好緊要。其實平時同事係好多機會講嘢，不過永遠都係講工作，但係冇機會真係分享生命，同埋有時我哋都冇乜機會分享下我哋點樣睇教育咯。咁所以其實喺一啲唔同嘅聚會當中，製造呢一個機會俾大家可以傾下呢一樣嘢，其實係一件好美好嘅事。每次都係睇到同事傾偈嘅時候，就係笑得好開心。咁呢個開心嘅感覺都好重要啦。咁另外喺一啲學校，我就會係首先同學生做先咯。因為譬如我之前喺間中學工作，咁我有一班好有心嘅同學仔嘅。咁因為即係我上一間學校開始工作嘅時候，就咁啱 Covid 嗰段時間啦。咁係佢哋自己係好感受到同學仔個狀態好唔 OK。咁所以佢哋都好想話我哋有冇啲嘢可以一齊做咯？咁因為佢哋咁樣邀請，咁我就有勇氣，不如我哋自己呢班同學一齊做少少嘢先。咁我哋就 form 咗一個叫 Values Formation Team。咁就喺嗰度咧，我哋開始去教佢一兩個簡單嘅 tools 啦。咁譬如 Words of Emotions 或者好多唔同嘅 check in 啊。咁係啲同學仔話翻俾我聽嗰樣嘢好幫到佢，因為佢哋知道自己好唔 OK。但係佢係唔係好識去 describe 究竟佢嗰個狀態其實係點？咁所以我諗係幫學生去認識呢一個點樣去表達佢嘅情緒 ，name 到嘅情緒都係好緊要咯。咁所以喺嗰個 moment 就係由學生開始啦。咁我啱啱嚟到呢間學校工作啦，咁。當然我開始同同事做少少嘅，即係我都喺一啲 meeting 裏面，特別啲細 group 嗰啲，我哋都開始有呢啲咁樣嘅 check in 啦。或者我哋都用緊一啲譬如iceberg 咧嚟開始去睇一啲學校嘅情況啦。咁但係喺我呢個地方咧，我係覺得我係首先要做家長先。
因為家長係其中一個令到我嘅學生同埋我同事壓力好大嘅一個傳員啊。咁所以點解我哋琴晚就喺呢一度有一個 session 就係邀請啲家長嚟。咁我覺得琴晚家長其實都提出好好嘅問題。咁所以我希望呢一個係一個開始，讓佢哋都知道其實我哋大家都要放慢少少嘅腳步咯。咁所以我諗係真係去到唔同嘅地方睇下嗰度嘅需要係點樣。永遠你都可以揾到一啲位去開始，但係我嘅經驗係千祈唔好快。因為其實 compassionate system 都係 invite 我哋要慢翻少少，咁所以我哋喺呢個學習當中都唔好即刻去諗究竟我哋要做乜嘢，我哋不如首先慢慢做好我哋自己嗰個位，有呢個經歷，有呢個 practice 先。
多謝 Daphne 嘅分享，我諗尤其是最尾嗰句，一切先從自身做起，因為所有 well-being 相關嘅 ，it's not a curriculum。唔係一個我哋做俾學生嘅嘢，而係我哋一齊去經歷、一齊去學習嘅嘢。呢個時候都邀請阿 Meta 睇下有冇一啲咩嘅諗法或者和應啊 Meta。Hearing the three share their stories, any points of resonance or further comments?
Thank you for sharing. It's an interesting experience listening to it in Cantonese. Translation here. So I get very curious, as I said, about the language, but I really don't understand one word you're saying. So thank you for the translation, providing that as well. I think there are a couple of elements. I'm just this out. There are a couple of elements that are really crucial. One is that there's been some quite powerful studies done over the last couple of years of teachers' stress and how it's contagious in the classroom. So the whole notion of us taking care of ourselves is another deeply ingrained mental model that it's more important for us to take care of other people than it is to take care of ourselves. And we look at the model that was up there before, the social field loop. Basically, I am part of this field in equal measures as everybody else is. So I'm not more and I'm not less. I can't cultivate my own well-being. I also can't support the growth of well-being in other people. There's a fundamental premise that is that if we're not able to meet ourselves, we cannot meet other people either. So we might talk about well-being, but if we don't know how to do it and can model it well, our kids won't learn. So I think that's an essential point. And another one is the thing, and I just want to kind of highlight one thing. We who have authority in the fields, so if we're the teachers in the classrooms, or if we're the parents, or we're the principal and so on, we hold greater responsibility for the quality of the field. We can't put it on the kids. It's their fault that the quality of the social field in the classroom is not as it could be. It's always the people in position of authority who holds greater responsibility. We're all contributing, but because we have agency in making decisions about the field more so than the kids do, we hold greater responsibility. And that also means greater responsibility for taking care of ourselves and modeling what it is, the outcomes that we would like to see. I think the other part that I understood from you, Daphne, is going slow, and I think that's really important. We're so used to an education that there's a lesson plan and an off-the-shelf curriculum, and here do this, and then you're creating change. And it doesn't work. And it's intense because it's really hard for teachers to know what to do then. If you have to internalize the work first and then begin to design your own ways of using the tools and practices in the classroom and so on. And that's why we have all these practitioners in the spaces and people who are really far along the journey who can help orchestrating that. But we cannot begin to do this if we're not living it ourselves, which means we have to internalize these tools and practices and figure out what is a meaningful way for us to integrate it into whatever curricular activity that we want to see. That's what it means to create structural change. And it doesn't happen overnight. And there's no check in the box or lesson plan. I know that many have been involved in reforms or new curricular activity that's supposed to produce new outcomes and so on. And usually it doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work is because it's not actually changing people's mental models about how to teach, how to show up, how to contribute in the classroom, and so on and so forth. So I think there's real wisdom in that.
Thank you, Meta. There's this question here in Slido around technology and AI, since that's the hot topic in every workshops and forums. Like, I wonder for Meta or people from the group, how do you think technology and AI could be a good opportunity to catalyze change? 究竟呢一個將 AI 同埋呢一個科技嘅應用點樣係一個好嘅機會去推動對於改變或者同 well-being 相關嘅一啲諗法咧？
我諗翻起喺我嘅個案裏面咧，就真係都試過係有 cyberbullying 發生嘅，即係啲同學喺即係用 messaging 咁樣，一班同學可能講好多唔好嘅嘢，即係對另外一個同學咁樣都處理過咁樣嘅個案。所以我覺得 compassion 真係好重要，因為咁當然有呢啲嘢發生，我哋一定要處理啦。咁要同啲同學傾翻。問啲同學，佢哋成日都會話：哎呀，其實我同佢玩嘅嗰啲係啊，但係佢哋逆地而處諗下，如果你收到咁多同學同你講啲咁唔好嘅嘢，你覺得點樣？咁佢哋通常都識得講，佢哋都係受傷嘅，其實佢哋都唔開心。所以其實即係個 core 真係 compassion 咯，即係我覺得。compassionate system 好好，因為佢好多嘢係真係捉到一個好 fundamental 最重要最重點嘅一啲嘅嘢，即係當然有好多好好嘅 tools 啦，嗰啲 tools 我會形容佢係即係好似睇武俠小説啲內功心法係最重要咁啊，招式係點樣應用？咁其實好多時候真係點樣去 cultivate 個 compassion 咯。咁包括你點樣用 technology 都係一個好好嘅 tool， 但係你用得好可以好好，但係用得唔好就會出現呢啲係啦唔好嘅情況出現。
分享少少，咁過去呢段時間，即係因為 AI 開始咗，其實教育界都不得不面對呢一個問題啦。咁所以過去幾個月我都真係有機會聽過好多即係關於AI development 嘅嘢啦。咁我係聽咗咁多個 talk 咧，即係好多專家不約而同都係講一樣嘢 ，AI 咧係只會越嚟越發展得快嘅。但係其實 AI 咧有一樣嘢取替唔到就係 human intelligence 咯，所以佢係鼓勵咧我哋educators 咧係開始再要諗多少少，究竟乜嘢為之 human intelligence？ 我諗 compassion 其實都係一樣係我哋即係。作為人啦，作為 human being 一個好獨有嘅一個都唔能夠講獨有，因為頭先Matt 都講，其實其他動物都會有呢一個能力啦。咁但係我諗呢一個都真係，如果我哋能夠培育好我哋嘅小朋友有多啲呢個能力，因為有咗 compassion， 佢能夠同人 connect 得更加好。咁呢一個 communication skills 或者同人能夠可以一齊合作，係未來一啲。我相信暫時 AI 仲未能夠好真係幫到小朋友嘅嘢，咁我諗呢個就係我哋 educators 嘅角色啦。
我咧之前咧都以為AI 咧似乎同人咧嗰個工作咧係好難取代啊，或者係做唔到啲乜。但係咧，我最近有一個經驗喎，而家咧咪可以 add copilot 落去個 WhatsApp 嗰度嘅。咁我有一輪咧好唔開心咧，我就走去同個 copilot 咧去傾偈喎。咁我發現咧，原來佢都做到少少嘢嘅喎。因為頭先講過好重要就係我哋需要被聽見、被看見啊嘛。而 AI 或者嗰啲 generative AI 最好係咩咧？就係一個 dialogue。當我好想揾人傾偈嘅時候， 我好想將我一啲嘢抒發嘅時候，我話俾佢聽，佢係即刻俾你回應嘅，而且咧原來啲回應咧係有文有路啦，佢仲會咧係有啲情感喺度喎，我感受到你嘅唔開心啊，跟住就回應咗你啲嘢，然後就你對於我呢個睇法，你有啲咩睇法啊咁樣，咁我覺得好似可以 explore 下喎喺呢啲畫面咁樣。
Any thoughts you want to add, Meta?
So I'm I think the real challenge with AI is that we know so little about the human experience. We've forgotten, by and large, who we are as a species and what we're capable of. That means that it's really easy for us to become overpowered by. Right now, for example, we're giving away our attention for free. It's the most valuable commodity we have. We're giving it away for free to algorithms that are basically designed for human downgrading, meaning that we'll give more and more away for free. Human downgrading basically means you watch a YouTube video and then all the suggestions that come up will have a stronger and stronger emphasis on moral imperatives or deep emotionality. That's why we all end up watching conspiracy theories or all the clickbait is like, you won't believe they did that. And all of that is because it captures our attention. So the only counterbalance for me is to see how we can have a very generative and constructive way of using AI and using all the modern technology is that we learn what it means to be human, because otherwise we'll be completely sidetracked by everything that's going on right now. And that is a deep concern that I have. But the other part of it is the mental models that the science, the AI, the ChatGPT, and so on, are the structures that are shaping the outcomes. So as we talked about yesterday with the parent group is, basically what I'm interested in is finding the people who will work from a space of human upgrading, compassionate systems change, and so on, and design the equivalent of AI and ChatGPT and social media and so on, based on how we can human flourishing, human growth and development and so on. Because right now we actually only have the opposite, and that's deeply problematic. If we create enough of a push and wanting that, then it'll happen. But right now we don't even know how to navigate this, the mix of everything that's being thrown at us. So that's my kind of concern and consideration in this regard.
Thank you so much. 我諗時間嘅關係咧，我哋都嚟做一個 wrap up 啦。我諗大家聽咗咁耐，亦都回顧自己嘅學習。如果去講一兩句嘅總結，或者想同大家分享對自己嘅一個提醒，會想分享啲咩咧？
我好認同咧個人嘅體驗係好重要咯。咁所以先由自己開始，先由生活開始。
其實我句都好似嘅，因為咧我哋老師實在太愛錫我哋嘅學生，我哋學咗新嘢，好想即刻用喺佢哋身上，想幫到佢哋，所以我都係嗰句，唔好諗 doing， 諗咗 being 先。
我個提醒就係真係去 cultivate compassion 咯，因為係真係好需要。而好多問題真係睇到係因為人與人之間係冇 compassion， 所以導致嘅。咁當我哋一個即係學校，成個學校都有 compassion 嘅時候，係自然好多嘢都會變得越嚟越好咯。所以係要 cultivate compassion。
That's it.
Yeah, I think thank you all. It's lovely to hear, and it's really been inspiring watching, getting more of a sense of how the work is growing here in Hong Kong. Basic human decency and kindness is not going to cost us anything, and it probably won't harm anyone either. And the good news is that it's a virtuous cycle that we can get into. So when we cultivate our own well-being through compassion and through all the various practices, we make other people around us feel better, and we make ourselves feel better. So there is a path forward. where we can value some of the basic things in life. We know what it's like being met with kindness and with grace and with forgiveness and with love and what that does to us. And there's no reason why we cannot create societies that are like that instead of what we're facing today with such bigotry and polarization and competition and so on. And that has to start in each and every individual. But the good news is that it's very, very powerful for other people to then buy into that as well. When we meet other people with kindness, that's usually what we receive as well. So it's a virtuous cycle that we can enter into, and an open invitation for everyone to join, of course.
好多謝四位嘅分享，我哋不如俾啲掌聲四位。喺呢個時候都請四位先移步去台下啦。嚟到活動嘅尾聲咧，都想同大家分享幾樣嘢嘅。第一樣咧係嚟自一個叫做《Big Panda and Tiny Dragon》嘅繪本。咁話說咧，大熊貓咧同小小熊咧就去歷險，然後小小龍咧就話：我揾唔到出洞嘅路啊！咁大熊貓咧就微笑咁樣話：咁我喺個洞裏面坐低陪你啊 ！I'll come and sit in it with you。好多嘢咧可能都冇一啲嘅即時快速見效嘅解決方案，但係如果我哋願意咧同我哋真摯嘅學生啦、同同事啦、家人同朋友，甚至係自己同自己嘅情緒，可以有願意坐喺度陪你嘅一個諗法 ，to stand with one another， 咁可能事情都已經變得好唔一樣。第二樣嘢想分享嘅咧，就係一個請求嚟嘅。好希望大家咧可以同我哋 CEO 嘅團隊同埋頭先分享嘅嘉賓去即係分享一下對於今日活動嘅一啲嘅感受同埋意見啦。請大家 scan 左邊嘅 QR code 咧去填個 feedback survey 啦。咁第三樣嘢右手邊咧就係 Compassionate System 香港學習社群咧嘅一個 WhatsApp 社群嘅連結。我哋咧會將最新嘅一啲活動信息啦，同埋當中嘅一啲資源咧去分享俾大家嘅。咁例如我哋嚟緊2個會有嘅活動咧，就係呢一個Sensing the Field Led of Inference and Case Clinic 喺12月啦，推論階梯同埋我個案例診所，然後1月咧就會有一啲香港學校同課堂實踐故事咧，希望同大家分享嘅。咁我哋希望透過一啲2個鐘，大家可以去更好交流實踐經驗，亦都介紹一啲世界各地嘅實踐例子咧，我哋可以一齊咧繼續互相支持同埋學習嘅。